Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our fourth installment of the USP 800 Preparedness Lunch and Learn. We're really glad you're here with us today. Today, we'll be covering requirements for a drug assessment, and Laura and Charlene will be touching on all aspects of that with their industry experience and knowledge. We're so glad you're here today, and we really created this environment to bring conversation and community surrounding USP 800 compliance because we know it can be just a challenging road. Today, we will be having some polling questions and they will appear on your screen, so make sure to engage with those so we can know how to best help you. And there also will be some Q&A sessions, and you'll note the Q&A icon in your toolbar. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask and we will answer those as we move along. And now I'll introduce our speakers for today. So first, we have Ms. Laura Paxton. She's the CEO of Our Pharmy, and she has over 35 years of experience in the healthcare industry. And then we have Ms. Charlene Kristen, who's a customer experience specialist with Our Pharmy. She has 20 years of experience as a certified pharmacy technician, and we're so glad to have her on the team and to hear from you both today. So now I'll pass it off to you, Laura.
Thank you, Carrie, and thanks to all of you who are joining us today and spending time with us learning more about USP 800. We hope that you'll learn something new today, something valuable that you can take with you. Just to review the upcoming webinars that we have, next week we'll be talking about creating and updating a hazardous drug list, and we're also going to add a little NIOSH 2016 versus NIOSH 2020 to that. May 11th, we're going to talk about safety information in the EHR, and then what to do when the inspectors come knocking. And finally, on May 25th, we're going to have a wrap up. So thanks to you all for being with us. At the end of this webinar, we are going to create a page on our website, ourpharmy.com, that will have a comprehensive list of USP 800 resources, some of the resources that we use in our work with USP 800. There's going to be a QR code that you can scan at the end of this to actually have access to that page easily. If you have information that you use with your USP 800 research that you don't see there, send either Charlene or I an email so we can make sure that that gets included in our resources page. So it'll be very helpful for everybody. So let's get started. And the first thing we're going to talk about is, well, first of all, we drew straws to see who would get the ICID slide, and I won, I think. And so when you're thinking about hazardous drug characteristics, the things that you have to think about are carcinogenicity, teratogenicity, and other developmental toxicities, reproductive toxicity, organ toxicity, genotoxicity, and structures and toxicity profiles of new drugs that mimic existing drugs determined hazardous by the previously mentioned criteria. That's a mouthful, but it gives you a nice roadmap of things to think about when you're defining these medications as hazardous or not. And now we have a poll by Carrie.
Thank you, Laura. So here's our first poll today, and we have a little bit of background here, so I'll read it out loud. So in a perfect healthcare world, drugs reviewed by P&T have already been assessed for hazardous characteristics. But what about those that have not made it to P&T? So the question is, how long after a new hazardous drug comes through the doors of your facility does the staff have information needed for managing the risk? So you should see the question appear on your screen right now. We'll give you a few seconds. And it looks like 66% of you said a month or longer, and 33% of you said 1 to 5 days. Thanks for answering.
Thank you, Carrie. So on the current NIOSH list, here are some things that you probably already know, but let's just restate them. We know that NIOSH 2016 has 3 groups. Group 1, anti-neoplastics. Group 2, non-anti-neoplastics that meet 1 or more criteria and of the NIOSH criteria for a hazardous drug. And then we have Group 3, drugs that primarily pose a reproductive risk to men and women. Interestingly enough, in our very first client that we installed with our software, he asked us to create a group 4 and a group 5 for him because he wanted to have a group for flammable drugs and monoclonal antibodies. So think along those lines, because there may be some toxic drugs that are on your state's EPA list that might not be on the NIOSH list. And if you're handling those in your compounding area, that also relates to the flammable situation. Many acids are used in compounding, so be aware that many of those are caustic, hazardous chemicals, and you might want to add a group for that. Now, Charlene, what are we seeing with some of our clients who have chosen to use the NIOSH 2020 list?
Well, Laura, what we're seeing is that they are including all the drugs on NIOSH 2016 as well. So they're doing this just to make sure they're covered, and they want to minimize or mitigate risk as much as possible. Yet they are categorizing them based on the 2020 list using the Table 1 and Table 2 criteria.
Okay, thank you.
So sometimes you're going to need to make the hazardous decision or not, the hazardous or not call yourself about the new drugs. A lot of times information surrounding toxicities for drugs that have been fast-tracked through the FDA is scarce, and this creates a gap concerning new drugs as well as investigational drugs. So categorizing drugs that were approved by FDA after the most recent NIOSH list was published can be complicated, but one way to complete the assessment includes, but is not limited to, the following. So you might want to consider referring to a subscription drug information source such as Lexicomp or Clinical Pharmacology, as these references may use drug information specialists to complete the review of new drugs. Consider the dosage form and the exposure risk for your organization's workflow, as well as reviewing the 6 NIOSH characteristics.
So when you're thinking about those 6 characteristics that we talked about earlier, you can find a lot of that information in the drug package insert or in safety data sheets. Another source that we use are black box warnings. You can find those in the drug package insert, and that's FDA Daily Med. If anyone doesn't know that, that's going to be on the resource page. Those also have the warnings and precautions, adverse reactions, how to use it in specific populations, and all of these other items that you see. PubMed is a great source to use for published studies in humans or animals to give you more information.
So there are some similar methods that can be used for drugs in clinical trials prior to the approval by the FDA. Here at our Pharmy, we search for any available hazardous drug information when a new anti-neoplastic is brought to the market, or a drug that has similar characteristics of one that is on the NIOSH list. When one of our clients has made a decision to add one of the new drugs to their hazardous drug list, we share that with you on Twitter. So just search for our Pharmy to find us on Twitter. So I'm sure you're aware that NIOSH has removed any standard monoclonal antibodies from the HD list. One rationale for this is that the molecular size of these medications is too large to have any appreciable penetration through the skin. However, some are conjugated with other properties and would need to be handled accordingly. The NIOSH list is updated periodically with interim changes noted on their website. An organization's designated person should be monitoring that NIOSH website for changes. Carrie, how about a poll?
Thank you, Charlene. So as you'll see, this poll also has some background information pertaining to capsation at 8%. So if you will please take a second to read And knowing all of this provided information, would you be inclined to put capsaicin at 8% on your hazardous drug list? And we're just asking a simple yes or no, and you should see the question appear on your screen now. All right, thank you everyone for answering the poll. And so it looks like 66% of you said yes, you would put capsaicin at 8% on your hazardous drug list, and 33% said no. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks
Carrie.
for that, Carrie. So there is no right or wrong here. It's all about how we can protect everyone from known risks. Keep in mind that your hazardous drug list may be NIOSH based, but it is also your decision to add items that it's your decision to decide what additions are made to your organization's list. No inspector is going to write you up for being overprotective. Obviously, our client here thought the best way to mitigate the risk for this drug was to add it to their hazardous drug list.
Very nice. Thank you, Charlene. Now, does anyone have any questions? Oh, Carrie, I don't see any questions. So let's wrap up. So once again, thank you for your time. Next week, we're going to have a webinar on creating and updating a hazardous drug list. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the differences between NIOSH 2016 and NIOSH 2020. And then we're going to talk about safety information in the EHR when inspectors come to visit. And finally, on May 25th, we'll have a wrap up. So we want to thank you all so much for joining us today and spending your time with us. Carrie and Charlene, thank you for all of your knowledge and sharing that information with us as well. Notice this QR code is ready for you to scan so that you'll have access to our hazardous drug resource page. I'm going to say it again. If you have resources that you use that you do not see on our page, please let us know so we can have the most comprehensive list out there to help all of you in your quest to make sure that your healthcare workers are safe. And we thank you all very much for your time. And we look forward to seeing you next week. If you would like to sign up, here is the QR code that you can scan to sign up for next week's webinar. And we hope you have a wonderful day. And thanks again for all of your time. We do appreciate it.